Hi, welcome to Manas Shil YouTube channel. Before we start, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you. Let's start the video. If you haven't watched the previous video, I'll link it in the description box, or you can click here. Chapter 2. A short-lived everyday life. Gazel wants to be strong. Gazel watched us and nodded, deeply moved. So, Remur, if you don't mind, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Is that okay? If I'm able to understand. Well, I've mentioned this before, but I'd like to ask you about the ultimate skill. If I continue to hone my sword skills, do you think I can defeat an ultimate awakened? Oh, that's quite the direct question. Depending on the situation, it wouldn't be impossible to win. It would be a very tough fight, but not impossible. The lesson I have learned is that ultimate skills can only be countered by ultimate skills. It's better to think that you can't compete at the unique skill level. So, however, if certain conditions are met, I think it should be possible. Well, what are those conditions? For example, Yuki Kagurazaka's anti-skill was a nasty super specializing ability that blocked my powers. Also, Diablo overwhelmed an ultimate gift owner with his magical own. It's only a possibility, but I think that the key is willpower. If a mental life form exists only by willpower, it seems to be able to resist the ultimate power even without an ultimate skill. I think this guess is correct with a high degree of certainty. I didn't want to be definitive, but I thought it was almost certain, because it actually was in agreement with Seal-san's view. So, the key is. So it's a matter of whether I can increase my willpower to the point where it rivals that of a spiritual life form. Then, after the way of the sword, there may be a quicker way. What? It seems that, if you are recognized by mythical grade armor, you can become the equivalent of a spiritual life form. This was the answer. Well, there was also the foul technique of granting power, but too much power can destroy you. Or was it greed instead of power? It may have been changed from the original parable, but I think it still conveys my point. You can't master the power, if you don't have the strength to handle it. That's why I don't grant skills to all of my subordinates. Also, there was no way that I was going to do that to Gazel. He'd have to do his best on his own. In the first place, I can't grant skills to someone who is not connected to my soul. I awakened Rain in Mizari, but that's not the same thing as this. So this time, I think getting mythical grade is probably the best solution. That said, mythical grade equipment is not so easy to obtain. I have also been trying to analyze Hinata's Holy Spirit armament and mass produce it, but no matter how hard I try, I can't seem to get it to reach the legendary grade. If I put it on, I might be able to reach the power of Saint, but I don't think it's enough to compete with an ultimate skill. Mythical grade, huh? Gazel muttered and looked at his own sword. The well-used sword was probably of legendary grade. It also seemed to be a fairly high-ranking sword. However, there were countless scars on the blade. This was the result of clashing with Kondu's sword. It was fortuitous that it didn't break, but this sword's life is over. Indeed. It must have been a national treasure passed down from generation to generation. And yet, now that it was like this, it could only be kept on display. No, but perhaps, shall I ask Kurobi? Maybe he can bring the sword back to life. What? Is that true? I can't promise anything, but Kurobi has a proven track record of renewing Gazel's spear. Kurobi had repaired Gazel's vortex spear using the Heiirkane I provided, and it was reborn at a stage just short of mythical grade. With continued use, it would eventually evolve into a mythical grade model. I still have a surplus of Heiirkane left over. The sword doesn't seem to be dead, so maybe, please. I don't care if you fail, just ask Kurobi Dono. It's a great service, but I'll spare no expense for my senior apprentice. He's always been such a great help to me, and this is the time I should return the favor. With that in mind, I accepted the sword from Gazel. Aside from the sword though, is there any other way to get mythical grade equipment? Do you think there is? Since you don't seem to know anything about common sense, let me tell you that even something legendary grade is a national treasure. And it's from a major country. You wouldn't find them in an empire, let alone the middle of nowhere. Please don't be so shocked. I thought that would be the case. The result of my research is the same. I had to search all over the Western nation's back routes, but I've only managed to find a few legendary grade items. Now that Sae had confirmed Gazel's words, the remaining hope was left to Kurobi. Incidentally, Sae's twin swords were also renewed by Kurobi's hand. Unfortunately, it did not reach the mythical grade, but with Sae's ability, that was not a big problem. On the contrary, he thinks positively that there is room for growth. There's no point in asking for what you don't have. More importantly, do you think you can compete with an ultimate skill if you become a spiritual life form? That's not an absolute either. It's natural that there are differences between individuals depending on the number of years they've lived, but a newborn archdemon still seems to be useless. If one has a strong will and the mental strength, energy, to support it, then they can resist the ultimate power. Meh, your explanation is too vague to understand. No, I don't think that's the case. But if you're going to go that far, I'll make it simple. In short, it's about spirit. I didn't want to say this, because it was more of a gut feeling. It would be a mistake to think that you can cover up anything with fighting spirit, but when it comes to an ultimate skill, other explanations were more difficult to explain than this. For the most part, since we live in a world where a flash of a sword can split the atmosphere in a flash of light, there may not be much difference between swordplay and magic. If you train your willpower, you can distort even the laws of the world. It is easier to understand, and everything will be all right if we assume that it is. After listening to my explanation, Gazel became serious and fell silent. I glanced at Ajer, who was also looking thoughtful. Then, Sae opened his mouth. It is exactly as Rimuru-sama says. As a recipient of an ultimate gift myself, I cannot speak too much, but I do feel that, if I put my spirit on my sword, I can kill any opponent. Ajer nodded his head in agreement. That is true. In my case, it was as if I sublimated all my will into a blade. With the will to kill the enemy itself, my own body becomes the blade, and I believe that nothing cannot be killed by my sword. Therefore, it can kill even formless things. That's right, Ajer's skill was blade transformation. If we were to simply compare the existential value, Ajer's transformed sword would not be better than the mythical grade. However, Ajer was superior in his sharpness. It is said that mythical grade has a will, but it is still not as strong as humans' will. Ranga popped his head out of my shadow and joined the conversation. My case was a little different. I was asleep in my lord's shadow when I suddenly felt as if I had heard a strange voice, and then it hit me. Stellar Wind King, Haster. But I think it was because I kept wishing to be of service to my lord that it took shape in this way. Hahaha, Ranga said happily. Maybe he's gotten smarter lately, but his lower body was still in my shadow. So, I couldn't see it, but I guess that his tail was wagging as hard as it could. It's really cute. I used to be a cat person, but recently I've come to think the dogs are nice too. I think that Ranga was a significant contribution to this change of mind. Anyway, I hope the stories from Sae, Ajer, and Ranga will be helpful. Spirit, huh? Well, there's no need to be hasty. If the enemy attacks while I'm here, then I'll help you. Please don't hesitate to ask me. That would be certain. Between Gazel's power and Ajer's swordsmanship, I think they would be a good match, even if the opponent was Kondu. At the very least, it would buy some time. However, if your opponent is Velzert-san, you'd better run away without hesitation. She's probably not the kind of opponent you can fight. Is it? Yeah. I can't say for sure, because I haven't seen her in action, but she felt creepier than Velgrund-san. I hate to admit it, but you're probably right. As for me, after seeing Velgrund, I understand how reckless it is to challenge a true dragon. But as a king, I can't abandon my people. Then we can only pray that Velzert does not attack. If she does, let me know. I said so, and indicated to my mobile phone. You have it. As I've said before, it's a magical device that allows you to talk directly to someone. There aren't many of them made yet, so take good care of it. That said, I only gave him my personal number, and a direct line to the control room. I didn't give him Eltan's or Meyermiles Kun's numbers. I think it is bad etiquette to not have asked such things directly from the people themselves. I remember being annoyed when my cell phone number was given to my business partners without my permission before I died. I see, so if you type in the number you have on file, you'll be connected to the other party. That's right. Not many people have this, but if they do, ask them for the number. If you need help with something, you can ask me. Well, that's the way it's supposed to work. Call me if you need anything, and I'll see what I can do. Alright, I'm counting on you. Of course, if there's anything I can do, don't hesitate to ask me. Personally, I'll do everything I can to help. Gazel and I laugh at each other. I don't think it's likely that Worgen will be targeted, but I'm relieved. And thus ended the discussion on emergency response. After staying in the Dwarven Kingdom for a few days, the next stop was the Farmina's Kingdom. This is where Gadra is staying. Gadra, who had become Diablo's disciple, was also helping Tensura. It seems that Gadra was forced to give up all of the information on the Empire in order to secure Masayuki's succession to the throne. He seemed to have been busy going back and forth between the two countries, but now he was settled in the Kingdom of Farminas. I thought I'd take this opportunity to ask him some questions. The capital of the Farminas Kingdom was livelier than I had imagined. The city had been under construction when I came here before, and it was the same now. The difference between now and then was that more areas had been cleaned up. In the outskirts of the capital, a large station had been completed. In the vicinity of the station, there were warehouses. Because it was a relay point between Bloomond and Dworgen, it was necessary to have a place to store various goods. A station building was constructed adjacent to the capital since it was not possible to secure a place in the capital. The reason why the construction of royal capital was postponed was that the priority was placed on economic activities for the future. Another reason may be that the current Farmina's family had no money. To put it simply, I was lending them all the money for the construction. The contract for laying the rails for the magic train was managed by our country. At first glance, this may seem like a generous thing, but that is a shallow view. The fee for the use of the railroad would become our country's income, and we had placed the unbeatable condition that the expenses for the use of the land would be free forever. Once the construction was finished, all we'd have to do was sit and wait for the money to be collected. Even after deducting the labor cost, the maintenance cost of the train, the maintenance cost of the rails, etc., the annual profit was estimated to be quite large. That's why I was responsible for the magic train project, but Farmina's was responsible for the urban development of the surrounding area. Myron was mainly in charge of planning the development of the city, but she was forced to take a leave of absence due to childbirth. It was Yaum, who became the king, who rose to the occasion. He has said that he was uneducated, but he still had a good head on his shoulders. He took the initiative to study hard in order to replace Myron, who had become immobile. As a result, even now that Myron has recovered from childbirth, she is struggling to lead the nobles and officials. To support Yaum, I gave him a low-interest, unsecured loan. Why not interest-free, you say? If the loan was interest-free, the borrower would inevitably feel indebted to the lender and become reserved. In addition, the lender might feel superior to the borrower, and the relationship may become one that cannot be called equal. Lending and borrowing money between friends can be the biggest cause of losing friendship. That's why we made the contract between the two countries and concluded it in a firm form, so that both parties would be satisfied and both parties would benefit from it. For this reason, the construction work was done in such a way as to prioritize economic activities, and the development of the city began to follow suit. While we finished the reception at the gate and looked at the lively city, a horse-drawn carriage was expressly prepared for us. Normally, we should have been accompanied by our own officials, like a procession of feudal lords. However, this was an emergency, and there was no time for an elegant trip by train, so I used teleport to get here along with Sally and Ranga as my companions. The reason why I contacted Gadra and asked him to prepare a carriage was to keep a low profile in the Farmina's kingdom. I was relieved to know that he had sent a carriage to pick us up. Unlike Melum's country, this one was very thorough. Thank you for your patience. King Yaum is waiting for you. I will take you to the castle. Or rather, it was Gadra who got out of the carriage. That wasn't a bad idea. Whoa, that surprised me. You didn't have to come all the way to the gate. That's not possible. Such a prestigious role would not have been possible without such an opportunity. But more than that, if I did not greet Remure-sama, Diablo-sama would surely have me executed. Gadra laughed, but it did not sound like a joke. If he's bullying you, why don't you tell me? For the time being, you'll be under my direct control. It was a little disconcerting calling an old man like Gadra you, but I'm afraid I was getting used to it. I would like to advise Gadra, thinking about it. Diablo may be quiet in front of me, but he tends to be reckless when I'm not looking. If he does so in Leon's country, that's a laughing matter, but it becomes a big problem if he does so within Tempest's group. Gadra is apparently Diablo's disciple, or rather, his faction, so he can't complain openly. That's why I, as his boss, should follow him from behind the scenes. But Gadra laughed, and said it was no problem. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy it.